Welcome to the Everyday PM podcast, the podcast where we discuss project management principles for your everyday life. My name is Campea, and I'm a certified project/program manager with over a decade of experience working for healthcare, retail, consumer goods, tech, marketing, you name it. I think I've been all across the industries as a PM. Today, we are speaking with Laura Chattington, founder of Talking Shop Co. And Laura carries such an impressive resume and has been on the podcast previously for a few episodes now, Laura. So welcome back. And we are here today to talk about having the confidence to communicate effectively with senior stakeholders. So Laura, welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited to host you again, especially in this month where we are celebrating women, women's history, International Women. This is such a great honor for you to come back and grace us with your presence. So for those who have not met you yet or listened to a previous episode that you've been on, please take a brief moment to introduce yourself to our audience.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me again. And as you say, on a great month for women, International Women's Day. My name is Laura Chattington, and I'm the lead trainer at Talking Shop and ActivateMyCareerLive.com. And we actually help professionals who feel like their careers are plateauing or not progressing fast enough. And we help them elevate themselves in the workplace, project managers, program managers, so that they can really fast track their career. And actually my background is tech and project management too. So I have experience in the challenges that your listeners are constantly facing on a day-by-day basis.
And I love when you are able to come on here and kind of share those experiences with us, Laura. And as I get to know you as a person and as a professional, you have been able to influence from your project teams to the C-suite level executives. You've done a lot of coaching in that area as well. So before we get into today's topic, I just want to really call out or shout out to you and all the great work you've been doing to try to help people progress their careers and really activate and advance their careers, as you've been saying. And so can you talk a little bit about maybe you have some events or anything going on that people can tap into if they're interested?
Yes, for sure. And actually the thing to do is attend the masterclass that we run at ActivateMyCareerLive.com. There we will take you through the concepts, the training, the tools, the systems that really enable you to elevate yourself and move into being that strategic professional that you need to be as you progress through your career. So that is just to go to the masterclass. That is the best way to find out and have some experience with the type of training that we do at www.activatemycareerlive.com.
Well, there you go. I mean, learn from the best. Laura is here. She's providing her knowledge and her experiences. And today we're going to tap into probably just a little piece of that. So we're not going to give away, I don't even know if this is covered in your masterclass or not, but we're not going to give away the secret sauce yet. But I think it is important to talk about when you're activating or trying to elevate your career, communication is really a big piece of that, and understanding how you communicate, whether it's as a project manager or if you're a part of a project team, but understanding your communication style as well. So I think communicating in general can be challenging. Communicating up can be challenging. So Laura, why don't you kick us off with this topic and kind of some of the guidance and tips that you want to portray to our audience?
Absolutely. And I think communicating up is one of the kind of key skills that you need to have in your toolbox when you're, no matter what job you do. And if it's okay with you, I'd just like to share a little bit of sort of my experience and really why it is so important to be able to communicate upwards and be able to communicate to senior stakeholders. And then we can talk about how to do that, and also how to do that with confidence.
Absolutely.
And so one of the stories that I share is about sort of walking in, getting an email from my boss, my first senior stakeholder, getting an email from my boss, being asked to attend an unexpected meeting, 2:00, his office. And I sort of walk into that meeting and I'm sitting uncomfortably on that chair. And when you're trying to look relaxed.
And I'm going to guess the email you got, Laura, probably just said meeting with no context about what it's about or anything. Okay.
Nothing.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. So nothing, 2 o'clock, my office, I walk in trying to look calm, but actually inside I'm feeling like this sort of like teenager, awkward, sitting there, not knowing what to say, where to look. And, you know, and with experience, and you sort of feel your heart pumping, your hands are sort of sweating. My boss starts talking and he says to me, they're making redundancies. They're sorry, but they're going to have to let me and 19, 20 other people go. And he has decided, he's very sorry, but he's decided to keep my colleague, James, who was the other. He's decided to keep him because he had connections in the industry. And have you ever had one of those moments when you're sort of sat there and it kind of takes a few minutes for what they said to sort of realize what they said?
Yeah.
And then you sort of realize you're confused, and then like, what? And then it sort of sinks in, and you start thinking, oh, hold on a minute, I just don't understand. You know, I that sort of realization turns to frustration because you've worked and worked and worked, and like this wasn't my plan, right? This wasn't my plan, and I wanted to progress my career. I wanted to have a successful career, and I certainly wasn't expecting my boss to make me redundant. I've been working crazy hours. I've been taking my work home. I've been working at the weekend. I've been sort of missing out on friends and family, and I just felt like I thought I'd be further ahead, and I'm being made redundant. And I was sort of asking myself, you know, what am I missing? What am I missing here? Because I knew that I was a very competent manager. I knew that I was delivering on everything that I needed to do. And actually, I don't know if it's the same over there, but in the UK, the end of year is sort of end of the year, and so they make redundancies just before Christmas.
Oh yeah, usually.
And I'm sure it's the same there, right? But
yes,
it's the same here. And I was at my parents' house, and I was sitting at my parents' house thinking, why was I made? Why I was running the biggest project, I was managing the biggest project. I was confused. Why was I the one that got made redundant? Why did the senior team want to keep James, and why not me? And I was sort of mulling this over, because actually James kind of rocked up at 10 a.m. in the morning. He would have a coffee, take a few phone calls, write a few emails. He'd sort of get up, walk around the office, chat with our boss, chat with the other senior team. He'd leave the office at 3, and I'm like, well, it just makes no sense. And you know, there's people, right, who just don't, they seem to just get away with it, don't they? They seem to just get away with not putting the time in. So I was sort of walking around my parents' garden, upset whilst everyone else is cheering and having a great Christmas, and thinking, hold on a minute, what was it that I wasn't doing? And I was thinking about James's working day compared with mine. And it suddenly dawned on me, and I remember I was looking at my mum's rose. She has this rose bush, and I was thinking, you know what? Actually, he's not being lazy. He's not being lazy. He is actually doing something that I wasn't doing. He was spending time with those senior stakeholders, interacting with those senior stakeholders, so that he could be seen, right? And those senior stakeholders weren't seeing my hard work because they weren't seeing me at all. They were seeing James. And it kind of dawned on me at that moment that actually, so I sort of stood there in the garden, that actually everything that I wanted in my career, all that hard work, everything that I wanted to progress to and do was not going to come from just hard work. It wasn't, you know, that wasn't everything I needed to do. And if I wanted to make all that hard work count, I needed to, it's as important for me to communicate up and communicate with those senior stakeholders, because otherwise they're not going to notice me. They're not going to notice. Why would they be paying attention? They're not, right?
Agreed.
So there
And
I
I hate
was.
to say it, but it's very
It's
true what Laura is saying. The
yeah.
story is
I,
it couldn't be more real, what you're saying.
it's just a fact of life, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's not an opinion. It's just that everyone has their own stuff going on. And there was me slogging away in my job and waiting for the world to come to me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
On the other hand, James was actively going and communicating in whatever way he did. And he wasn't waiting around for people to notice his hard work. He wasn't waiting
Mm-hmm.
around for people to come to him. He was actively going to those senior stakeholders, building relationships, creating relationships. And he was doing that every single day.
Yeah.
And really that's what we're talking about today. And I just wanted to sort of start with the reason why you need to get good at this, get good at it, and get sort of, I know that we all have our sort of hang-ups and nervousness and everything, but being good at communicating up and communicating to senior stakeholders is key to progressing your career. And that's why we're talking about it today, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that story just resonated with me. I'm sure it resonates with a lot of our listeners. And it is absolutely true what Laura is saying. This happens quite regularly and it's unfortunate. But at the same time, to Laura's point, many times these senior stakeholders, they don't have any time,
Yeah.
to really focus in on who is each individual on this team. And so in her story, when she's talking about the differences between herself and her counterpart and how he was made more visible than she was, I think that is kind of a turning point for people when you make that realization for yourself in your own career about
Yeah.
the need to advocate for yourself, the need to Laura's point, and we're going to get into that, the need to communicate to senior stakeholders and how exactly to do that so that it's effective and make it meaningful as well for yourself as well as for those around you. It's not just a kind of a what's that saying, dog and pony show. This is legitimately, this is your professional career that
Yeah.
you have to be able to advocate for yourself where you want to be and let those that are in a position to help uplift you and bring you there see you, really, really see the value of you. So I love that story, Laura. I think it's a great way to set kind of the foundation for what we're going to dive into. So do you think we're at the point where I can start bugging you about what are the techniques? What is what is the secret things that we need to be doing to be able to effectively communicate with these senior stakeholders?
For sure. And I think just to touch on one thing you said about having to, communicate and promote yourself, there are obviously hang-ups people have about that, about it being cheesy, or, and we're not going to go into that today. Maybe that's something we can go into on another at another time. But I think it's important, the point you make about the senior managers are extremely busy. In fact, they're probably they've got more responsibility, more going on, and so it's not about waiting for them to pay attention to you. And when you do it tactfully, you can really get in front of them and use those opportunities to be visible, progress your career, build relationships, and do lots of good things. It's an intention of doing lots of good things for everyone in that environment. So let's talk about, so how do you talk to senior stakeholders, and then what are some of the tips that I can share on how to do that? And I think the first key thing to think about, and I think we spoke about this before, but it's about starting from the senior manager's perspective.
Okay.
And when you're working on a project and you're in it 24/7 and you know exactly what's going on, there's a tendency to walk into these meetings with senior stakeholders and go from your perspective. This is what's going on, this is what I need, da, 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 da. Now the thing is that the senior stakeholders probably, you might be the 11th meeting of the day, you might be the 25th work stream, you might be the 108th email. So actually going in with a frame of reference that A, they're super busy, and B, I need to be thinking about what is it that they're interested in about my project, what is important to them. Because actually when you think like that, when you think about whether it's senior stakeholders or anyone else, when you're thinking about, I've got to meet them where they are first, what are their priorities, what are their pain points, what are they looking to achieve, what do they care about? And if I go in and start talking in those terms, A, they're going to know exactly what you're talking about, because you're going to give them the heads up. This is what I'm here for. This is what I need you to do. This is what I need you to decide. Here are the key points you need to know. And that means that you eventually get what you want out of the conversation. I've done it myself in the past 1,000 times. I've walked in and gone, right, we've got this. This is what's going on. This is what, and they're kind of like, hold on a minute. You know, what do you need me? What do you need me to decide? You know, what do you need me to do? And their point of view is going to be different from yours, because you see the world from your frame of reference and they see it from that. They will have other priorities, they will have other experiences, and they will have different questions. So I think the first key is to go in and think through, what is it that they need to know to make the decisions that I want them to make? And if I want to get them to listen and pay attention, what are the things, what are the buttons I need to press that they're going to pay attention to?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I think that's kind of like the first place to start before you even walk in the room or into the call or into the online interaction, is starting there. And I think if you've got that clear in your mind, and actually it's the same if you're going into an interview, it's the same if you're doing a presentation, it's the same if you're presenting to anybody. If you think through what is it that they care about, you're going to get much more interaction from them, and they're going to be listening to what you've got to say. So that's number one.
Yeah, I love that analogy you just made about, think about it as if you were going into an interview. I think that is such a great correlation to make with any of these types of meetings, and that in an interview you are preparing. At least I would think you're preparing well in advance, right?
Yeah.
You're not just going through your professional journey, but you're also trying to anticipate what you might be asked. And so there's a lot of the aspects that you do, or those techniques that you would do to prep for an interview, that you would, as Laura is saying, that you would similarly use to prep for a meeting with senior stakeholders. And I have to tell you, as you're talking through this tip, I was just reminiscing in my head about all the various times in my career, early on in my career, and even today, where I've failed to do that.
Yeah.
And it's just makes such a huge difference between the memories that sink in with me, because there are memories that are there because I learned from this experience and not having done the prep work to be ready for that, versus the experiences that I've had. I think after I've realized that preparation is key, the experiences I've had talking with senior stakeholders and how effective that was. So absolutely, Laura, I love that first technique. I think that resonates with me. I'm sure it resonates with everybody.
I think also I'd add to, and I've had the same experiences in years ago and more recently. So it's not that you mustn't forget it. And I think what I just add to that, you cannot go into those meetings unprepared, because you will be eaten alive, because they are smart. They haven't got there because they're idiot. They are there. They're smart. They have experience. They have a lot of visibility. And if you go in unprepared, you just there's nowhere to go. So I think preparation is key for survival, maybe, but also to get influence them to where you want to get them to as well. So absolutely, I think that is, whoever, I'm sure someone said to me years ago, oh, we'll just go in and see what happens. I think at that level you really need to be prepared, and it's something to think about. And is just the what are they worth by the hour? Is to actually get it down to what are they worth by the hour? And you're taking the time, and you want to use that time as valuably as you can. So definitely prepared, and think about what it is that what are their priorities. And normally it's things like finance, risk, reputation, things like that. Just as a clue. Right.
Great point, Laura. Great point.
So we're gonna talk about confidence sort of at the end of and there's just a couple of other points I wanted to make before we get to the confidence bit. But the other point I would make is to respect the egos in the room, respecting the fact that there are big egos in the room. I'm not saying that every senior stakeholder has a huge ego, but actually, especially if there are more, there are a number of them in the room.
Sure.
One of the things that really matters as you go up the ladder is reputation, right? As much as doing the work, it's reputation and peer reputation and sort of other people in the room. And I think if you go into that interaction and think about that, it's not that you should say yes to everything, but you certainly need to respect that you're not going to win the argument. If there is some confrontation, you need to do it in a way that enables you to respect those egos in the room and intact those egos in the room, so that again you get your end result. And I think certainly in the senior stakeholders in the board meetings that I've been into, I don't think I've ever been in a board meeting where people sort of are openly saying, yes, I made a mistake, and anything like that. So I think, again, it's something that perhaps you don't think about from a project perspective so much, but there are definitely big egos going up the company for sure.
And for those that aren't really exposed to each individual, right? Because sometimes a board or the C-suite level could have 3 to 4 to 5, maybe even more. What are some of your experiences in how do you get to know these people without having had any interaction with them? Is it colleagues? Like where are you going to get this information?
Again, it depends on time and capacity and resource. I would want to go in with as much as I could, ideally. So if you've got colleagues who have experience with them, you can. I would always be looking them up online, seeing just having that information, like, oh, you came from this company, or you were the senior guy or girl on that project. Having some back, again, it just helps build rapport, right?
That's great.
It helps build rapport. And there are things that perhaps other people in the business know, that don't mention X, Y, and Z, because that always gets a negative. Do your diligence. And I think when you do go into that room, having that again in your pocket, it just gives you a bit more confidence. And I don't think again, it depends on how senior you're at, and you may only have like 5 or 10 minutes. You might have had an hour schedule, but you might have to go in and you've got 5 minutes, and they're not there to become, build relationships with you first and foremost. They're there to get that job done. And being concise with the way you communicate is important. And again, being focused comes back to our point, being focused on exactly what you want to get out of there. So I think you have to judge the room, the virtual room or the room. And if everyone's like chat away and build that rapport, but it isn't going on, which is lots of time the case, walking in and having that kind of, hey, how are you, chat, is not. So you kind of need to match the tone.
Absolutely. I think that's where those power skills, that emotional intelligence, the kind of, to your point, read the room, right? And adjust to that. That's where all that comes into play for sure. That's great. Thank you, Laura.
And I think if you, I used to work with a guy, and he supported the same football team as me. And I remember thinking, well, we're going to connect on that. But again, they might see that coming, they might see it, that most of them are credible, experienced. And again, they just don't want all that banter necessarily. They just want you to go in and give them the information that you need. So you definitely need that emotional intelligence for sure.
Absolutely.
To match. I'd be looking to match the conversation and how it was going. But actually taking and sort of going on to my next point, there is opportunity. There's an opportunity to build your credibility in those interactions. Now, you don't necessarily, you're not going in there to become best buddies with them, because I'm sure that probably isn't the right place at the right time. But there is an opportunity to give them some example. I always say, give examples, give your answers of the questions you get asked, but then give examples that build your credibility. And we talked about preparation before you go in. I would have in my pocket, I'd be thinking, if they're interested in tech projects, I don't know, AI tech projects, and I'd worked on AI tech projects, I would have my examples in my pocket, which I will be able to refer to, that builds my credibility. So the answer is this. And for example, I worked on a similar project where I worked for this client. It was this size, did this, it had these outcomes, and what you're doing is you're kind of filling in some color around who you are, what you do, what experience you have, and you're able to kind of filter that through the conversation. And that's a much better way of telling them how good you are and the experiences that you have. And again, if you're sort of pressing those buttons and lining it all up, they'll be like, oh, okay, so she's the one that did that project. When that comes up, I want her on my project.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's taking those opportunities to build your credibility in a tactful way. And one of the ways you can do that is using examples, so that you're not there going, I did this and I did that. You're just like, it reminds me of the project where let me give you some reference, let me back up what I'm saying, and things like that, because they will want credibility and to buy into what you're saying, because they're going to have to make a decision, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this technique in particular reminds me of the story you told at the beginning of the podcast, where this is an area where those that are kind of faking it till they make it, people will be exposed, right? Because they won't have examples to furnish that will, coincide with the conversation that's happening in the meeting. Or if they are also faking it, but also really good communicators, and maybe they do have 1,000 stories, but none of them are theirs, right? So there's this kind of, and that's part of what happens when you're in a room with people, is they kind of quickly pick up on what you are, what type of person you are. And so I think this is a really good area where the more you kind of build up your history of what you know and make it meaningful and valuable to part of the conversation, I think that will really help amplify you in that conversation and in that room. So thank you, Laura. That's another great technique.
For sure. And the key is to be specific, because it is more believable and it's where you can build your credibility. And I mean, it depends on who you're talking to, obviously. But certainly in my experience, when you're getting very senior people in very big companies, depending on where you were, you're not going to get anything past them. So if you're blagging, you're going to be found out. So depending on who it is you're speaking to, I would want to have very concrete advice and all my opinions backed up by credible experience, because I just think they just ask questions and go straight through it otherwise. And you lose credibility, and you're instantly someone, if they don't have time to give you a second chance, you're instantly sort of, right, no, we don't want them on the project. And I think that, again, it depends on the environment you're in, and obviously in sort of less sizable companies, then perhaps people aren't as experienced as some of those boards that we're talking about. So maybe there is a little bit of room to exaggerate.
That's a great word. Yeah. We're using very friendly words for probably the images of the folks that we've worked with in the past that give us this example. But yes, absolutely, Laura. I think that's a great way to put it.
And then I think one of the kind of core, and we're going to talk a bit about confidence, but I think one of the things to be thinking when you're going into these senior stakeholder interactions, and we become very self-conscious, don't we? What if they ask me questions I can't answer? What am I going to say? What if, and they never go through a presentation in the order you want them to. They always jump to wherever it is you need to go, and you need to go with that, because they are coming from their perspective and they need an answer to certain questions that they've got, so that they can say yes to the budget, say yes to the project, say yes or no to whatever it is. And so you have to sort of shift and flow with the conversation whilst keeping calm. And I think one of the key things to remember when you're going into these senior stakeholder interactions is to remember to focus on the value that you bring to the table, because you're hired to do a job, and they're not expecting you to do their job or be where they are in their careers, or even have the same comments or experience as them. They've hired you to do a job, and they want you to go with that value so that you can add value to the interaction, to the conversation. So when you feel yourself sort of like, you can think, well, actually, I know that I do this. This is the value I bring in, and that is what I'm going to focus on in this conversation. So really focus on the value that you bring to the table.
I imagine doing that kind of swings us into the topic of confidence as well, right? So when you understand your own value, I know for myself, when I see that, and I think as women in particular, we struggle with that, right? I think it's just, there's studies on this. There's entire studies about how the mechanics of our brain work as women, and how it's really hard for us to recognize the value in ourselves. But once you do, and even if that is believe me, this is a practice. This is not just a one-time aha moment. I see the value in myself. This is day-to-day reminding yourself of the value. And so I love this technique, Laura, so much, just because there's a lot. It's a very simple technique, but I think of all of them, people might struggle with this one in particular, maybe women, just because this is not something we're used to doing. And so to get yourself there could be a challenge, but I think when you do, it will definitely pay dividends for you, especially if you're going into a meeting like this, where you're surrounded by a senior leadership team, that all the confidence in the world would be exuding from you if you could figure that piece out.
Absolutely. And let's talk a bit about how do you do that. So one of the things is the value, and I think you're absolutely right. And again, we can talk for hours about the differences between men and women and all of that stuff. But whether you're male or female, focusing on the value you take into that meeting is a good way to get out of your head and focus on what's in the room. But one of the things that is key in these interactions is confidence. And it's always going to be confidence. And I know that in sort of when we're starting out in our careers, people are encouraging, and there's room to not show that you're nervous so much and things like that. But I think once you get to a certain level, that confidence is key to the interaction that you're going to have, because people pay attention to confident people. Right. We naturally, it's in our genes to pay attention to confident people, and confident people have that authority. And really, confidence what's going through us. It enables us to take action, and it enables us to think clearly. So they want you to be confident, because then they can trust the signals that they're getting, is that they're like, yep, she knows what she's talking about. We're going to make this decision, and then we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And as soon as that sort of confidence isn't there, they're kind of distracted and off to the next thing, because you've lost that credibility. And I think one of the sort of key things to remember is whatever is going on inside you, so however you're feeling inside, is what you project outside. So if you're feeling like, generally it's going to be showing. It's very hard for any period of time, certainly in that interaction, to hold down feelings that you're like freaking out. Now, they would expect you to be nervous because it's that hierarchy thing, but you need to have confidence in what you're saying. And I think there's a difference there. They don't expect you to be like ice cold and walk in and not be intimidated by that meeting. But they expect you to be confident in what you say. And I think you've got to think about what is going on inside, and therefore what am I projecting outside?
Yeah.
And you're not
And I love that you summarize all the techniques with, I love that we're covering confidence last, because I imagine if we flip this in reverse and we went with confidence first, people would be like, well, if I'm not confident, and what does the rest of these techniques mean for me? But very nicely, you have woven the end point of this, kind of the bow, is that if you do all the techniques that you've outlined before we got to this piece on confidence, that will absolutely help you kind of build to get to that area where you feel confident.
Yeah, everything we've talked about is about giving you more confidence. And I think one of the other things that everyone can do, and I do it, right? I do it before I interact when I'm going into important meetings, is that I always talk about confidence as a muscle. It's like a muscle. And what makes confidence is how you're breathing, what your posture is, your body language, what is going on in your head, how the emotions that are going through, all that connected up is how confident you're feeling. And when you practice feeling confident, then all that stuff starts linking up and you are more confident. And actually the point is that your brain cannot work out the difference between what is made up in your head, what is a made up experience, and what actually is real. So it makes sense that if you practice and if you tone your confidence muscle, then you develop this, and your brain is like, okay, that's what I need to go in with. I need to go in with that feeling. And one thing that you can do, and I do it every day, and I do it for slightly different reasons, is to take a few minutes every morning, and visualize that interaction going well. Visualize yourself being confident. It may be a made up interaction if you just want to feel confident, or it may be something that's coming up, or it may be something in the past. But if you just close your eyes and go through that experience, seeing what you see, hearing what you hear, feeling what you feel, and connecting those emotions, your brain doesn't distinguish between what is real and what is imaginary. And that is why visualization work, and why you can kind of build this confidence muscle. And I always get all my clients that's one of the first things I do for them, or get them to do, is I say, this is how confidence is made up. This is all the components of confidence. And yes, there are other factors that give us confidence, like we've discussed today. But at our core, you want to build your confidence muscle on a daily basis. And you know what's great? When you do it, it makes you feel good. And so you go into your day going, oh, okay, I'm ready, I'm on it. And okay, when you go into those senior stakeholder meetings, they are more challenging for sure. But if you're going in and flexing that confidence muscle, then you're just going to perform much, much better in those interactions. So take a few minutes of your morning and go through that visualization of any interaction where you are on top of your game, feeling really confident. And I promise you, it will shift and create that habit for you so that you can go into those interactions being much more confident. And when you're feeling confident, it just helps you perform better as well. So if people listening to this are like, I'm already confident, I do it so I perform better, and I'm on my A game. people who struggle with confidence do it to be more confident, and there's a kind of transition through that process. But it makes you feel great too. So part of a morning routine I always like to go through.
I love that you've portrayed the different aspects of confidence, right? Because I at least feel like when I was growing up professionally, the word confidence meant you were arrogant, or, you knew more than everybody else. And that's not necessarily what we're saying here. I love the way that you said it. It's like you go through these progressions of what confidence means for you. And it may be starting out in your career, it's just kind of building to be confident. Whereas later on in your career, because you've had the experiences and because you've practiced and given yourself the space to remind yourself that you should be confident in the value that you bring to the table, that it eventually kind of transitions to this other space where it's just, I'm confident, but how do I build on that? How do I make sure that it continues to add value? And so, yes, Laura, I love that you kind of tied this all up in a pretty bow with this conversation around confidence, because I think without that, the rest of the techniques they're there, but I think that it just all ties together very, very nice and neat. So, Laura, I think this has been a great conversation around how you can bring all those things together: techniques, confidence, build yourself up. And I appreciate that you're bringing it to us in this month as well for Women's History Month. I think it's just a very relevant topic, but no matter which gender is listening right now, I think that all of these tips and techniques can apply to you and how you would effectively communicate with senior stakeholders and do that with confidence. So, Laura, thank you so much for your time today on this installment of the Everyday PM podcast. If folks want to continue the conversation, I know we talked a little bit earlier about your masterclass, but if there's any other avenues that people can reach you on, please feel free to plug them now.
Yeah, no, I would, confidence is part of the training at the masterclass, as is senior stakeholder communication and how to really progress and build relationships in the masterclass. And I just say to everyone, come to that masterclass and then have some experience of the types of things, ways that we can help you. And then we can carry on the conversation from there. So that is at www.activatemycareerlive.com, and I look forward to seeing you there.
I highly encourage everyone to check it out. I've worked, obviously, Laura and I are still getting to know each other, but you've been on a few podcasts. You've given us a lot of great knowledge through those podcast episodes. And I've worked with, in my career, other professionals, people who are experienced, who can help. And so if this is an area that you're looking for help in, or if it's something else in your career, then definitely please feel free to reach out to Laura and attend that masterclass. So for the Everyday PM, you can support us as well. Support us on Spotify. I just realized Spotify has followers. I didn't know that existed. So we've got a few hundred followers on there, which is great. Thank you for those that are following the podcast. But if you aren't following the podcast yet, please give us a follow on Spotify. You can check out the video version of this on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Ann Campea. And you can check the notification bells so you know when new content goes up. Leave us a great comment, subscribe, all those great things to show that you support the Everyday PM. So that will do it for Laura and I in this installment of the Everyday PM podcast. Thanks everybody for listening today. And until next time, take care.